Brenda's house was directly across the street. So her front door faces what is essentially the car park. Now, from her front window, on the left, you could see the sort of kindergarten area. And on the right was the main entrance for the elementary school, which was first grade through sixth grade. Brenda decides that morning to load up her weapons, break the glass on the front of her door, and shoot across the street as children are arriving.
Hey everybody, how you doing? Welcome back to the Another Nobody podcast with me, your favorite nobody, Travis Myers. Today I have the pleasure of speaking to N. Leigh Hunt, the author of I Don't Like Mondays, okay, which is the Brenda Spencer story. And we have quite a long and detailed conversation about it. So let's get with it. Here we go with my new friend, Nicholas Hunt. Nicholas Hunt and his cat. How you doing, my friend? Nice to meet you.
How are you?
I'm doing great. I've been looking forward to this. I read your book, I Don't Like Mondays, and I have to say you did a great job with it. I really, really enjoyed it. It was so very, very detailed. I don't think that really I have questions outside of the book from what I learned, because I thought you really filled that space for me. Although I was familiar with this case and everything that happened, I obviously had no idea about all the ins and outs. But really, you're going to explain that to us now. And so yes, Nicholas Hunt, how you doing?
I'm really good. I wrote the book under my name, my pen name, N. Leigh Hunt. But Nick, go by Nick. I'm all good with that. Call me Nick. This is a big case, and anybody, regular listeners to your podcast will probably have their interpretation of school shooters and probably have their idea of what they look like, and probably understand that they're probably a white teenager who's angry, who took their parents' gun and raced through the halls of the school. This is a different story. And it's one of the first ones, and I call it the first modern school shooting. And the reason why I do that is because it's not the first time somebody shot a weapon at a school, and it's not the last time. It's not the first time that somebody shot somebody they didn't know. It's not the first time even somebody shot at children. But it is the first time that somebody shot at a school where they didn't know anybody at the school, and the media went nuts for it. This case was propelled into the common consciousness as a school shooting, and it was the first time the phrase school shooting was used.
Yes.
So that's why I think it gets that moniker, first modern school shooting, because technically it was the first time the phrase was used, and I think it fits. But, the book is not about arguing it. For whatever reason, people do want to argue about the different types of crimes, and we want to put them into buckets, and we want to classify them, and we want to say they are this type of murder, or this type of spree killer, or rampage killer, or mass killer. And really, you know what? The fact is, that doesn't matter, because people are deciding one morning to pick up a weapon and shoot people they didn't know, or stab people they didn't know, as
Correct.
they do in here in the UK. Brenda's different from that stereotype. Brenda was a 16-year-old girl who lived with her father and her brother, and her sister had recently moved out. And the father had custody. Their mother lived around the corner, and she was truant from school, and the dad was upset about this, but didn't really know how to handle it. He was fairly inept in the ways of parenting a daughter. She had really horrible PMS, and she would always say, look, I'm not feeling very well. The dad shied away from it, didn't know how to handle it, didn't ask for help. And, and just said, hey, do what you got to do. She allegedly was nicking some of his prescription drugs and was, bullshit around the neighborhood. And she'd been arrested a few times for stealing, but nothing major. The family's from Arkansas. She had a BB gun, which was not unusual. And for her birthday, for Christmas, apologies, he bought her a Ruger 22 rifle.
Yes.
Because she was doing so well in school. It looked like she was on the up. She was, getting close to 17, and he thought she was woman enough to have her own weapon. Now, nobody else in the house had a weapon. And again, this is different than what the common conscience tells you. We imagine all school shooters having a home full of weapons, and the child goes and chooses one for the day and has an arsenal to pick from. It's not the case here. Brenda has her own 22, and one morning she decides to shoot across the street to the school that's across the road. So she's about 100 feet away from the school, and as children are arriving on a Monday morning, she just starts shooting the children. Police are notified. Police come racing into the scene and take cover. They don't know where the bullets are coming from, how many people are in the house, and she keeps firing until eventually the reporters catch wind that she's shooting, and they call the house, and she answers, and she stops shooting. In the time that she was firing away, all of the children are hit in the lower extremities. One gets hit in the hip, one in the hand, various parts of the lower extremities of the body. The principal runs out to save the children and gets shot in the chest. The custodian comes to rescue him, gets shot directly in the chest. 2 bullets, bam, bam. And then the police arrive, and they go to help those people and take a bullet to the neck. So there's the interesting scenario that the children are shot in places where they wouldn't, say, die, for the lack of a better word, and the adults, the men, are shot directly in the chest and neck. So it adds this sort of, you can read into that what you like. And Brenda was a good enough shot to probably determine where she'd land the bullet. Bigger targets, you could say, easier standing still targets, you could say. There's a lot of things and variables that go in that. But that's what happened. She killed a custodian. She killed the principal. They were both veterans from the Korean War. She shot a police officer who was a Vietnam vet in the neck. He survived. He managed to, even with the bullet in his neck, run the gurneys to the back of the school and get people to safety. Absolute San Diego PD hero. Brenda eventually was talked out of the house by experienced negotiators from the San Diego PD. And in that time, she spoke on the phone to the local newspaper. They called the house. She answered. She told them what she was doing. They were shocked. And in that conversation, they said, "Why are you doing this?" And she responded, "I just don't like Mondays. This livens up the day." Now,
Yes.
a comment in infamy. And of course, during the 70s, the big punk movement was happening in Britain, and punk bands everybody wanted to make America. That's where you make a lot of money if you're a British band. And this Irish band, the Boomtown Rats, were in LA. They heard the story. They wrote the song "I Don't Like Mondays," propelling this, as I say, into international fame. Today, people say, "I love that song. It's a snappy little tune, a great little piano riff, great song."
Well, I grew up with it. Well, we
Yeah.
both did. We knew that song. That's probably. I mean, I'd like to say that I remember when this happened because it happened. I was about 14 years old when this happened. But I want to say that I may be mistaken, and it may be drilled into my head because of the song. The song may have made me know so much more about Brenda Spencer than I ever would have known from the TV news.
Yeah, I think so. And I don't blame the Boomtown Rats for writing a song about a crime. I wrote a book about a crime. I do partially wonder about their motive when releasing the album on the day of her plea bargain and court hearings and releasing the single to coincide. And
Yes.
then also they decided to perform the song in San Diego for the first time in front of people who could have been victims, or certainly, as I see it, everyone in San Diego was a victim that day because the world changed. Look, I'm not going to get into deep in that, although there is chapters in the book about Bob Geldof and how it came to be and what happened afterwards and the unrest amongst people in San Diego. Brenda likes the song. She's heard it. She thinks it's a snap.
She likes the song.
Well, hey, it's a nice song. It's a really well-written song. Let's not argue
Do
about
you?
that.
I know obviously Brenda is miserable in prison, and we're going to get more into her afterlife. But since we're talking about her liking the song, does she enjoy much of her fame as a whole? Because I do believe that much of Brenda's personality is attention-seeking behavior. Do you believe that she enjoys her infamy at all?
My opinion, she certainly
Yes.
doesn't now.
She doesn't now.
Well,
Okay.
let's run that through the grinder. because this is a really interesting one, because it is this belief from the FBI and other sources that the audacity of a serial killer or a mass shooter, just the audaciousness. They're obviously psychopaths and narcissists, and they focus on themselves and they just do it to be famous. I don't know. I just don't know. Brenda goes to prison. She had the opportunity to do press conferences. People have been begging her for years to do documentaries. She turned them all down. She's turned down every interview bar one, which is one that she initiated in about 10 years after the crime. I think it was maybe even 12 years after the crime, 1991. You'll find it online. It's a well documented interview where she thought, as she got close to parole, that she could change the narrative.
Yes.
And she did these interviews all over San Diego County, and I think she did two in LA as well, where she invited the press to interview her in prison. She did
I've watched them.
Yeah, she did this once. Um, Whereas if we apply it to other people who clearly enjoyed the fame, say Ted Bundy, he did multiple interviews and was begging
Yes.
to do more, and towards the end was even lying about his cases to support a narrative of people who were paying for these interviews. So, yeah, I'm not sure Brenda loved her fame. There's part of the story as well while she's in prison, how people knew who she was and even who she hangs out with in prison. A lot of them are famous. They're females in California committing these types of crimes are so rare that whenever they occur, they become very, very famous. I mean,
Yes.
she's in prison now with the Manson sisters. One of them was released a couple years ago, and she's just down the hall from Betty Broderick, who's a very famous murderer in San Diego history. And there's a connection between all those things. They all kind of knew each other beforehand in a weird way. Um, I'm not sure Brenda. I'm not sure she is excited about the fame. I've written the book. She's read it. She liked it. She told me what I got wrong. It was only two small little bits. I take that as a win.
Yeah.
She didn't want. She didn't want to offer any new pictures. She didn't want to offer any real outstanding information about her family or beforehand. In fact, she said to me, "Look, this is all I know about my grandparents. What else can you find out?" And I ended up finding out all kinds of stuff she didn't know. Let's keep in mind, she's been in prison since 1979.
Yes.
She went to prison before there was 911. She went to prison before there was a SWAT
Yes.
in San Diego. She went to prison before there were paramedics. She went to prison before police had bulletproof vests.
Yes.
So, at the time that she committed this crime, it was pretty much like, Barney Fife was your local sheriff who took care of the street. This is not like it is today, where going into a school shooting what's about to happen to you. You know the outcome. I don't think Brenda did, and I don't know if she. I think she wanted to be the topic of conversation, but I'm not
Yes.
sure that she wanted to, Trump-like fame. I don't
All
think
right. Well, she didn't know what she was getting herself into, so to speak.
she's a child. She's an
Yeah.
immature child,
Right.
and she's only 5 foot something.
Yeah.
She's tiny.
Well, I think she's only like 5'1".
Yeah,
You
she's
know.
tiny, and
So
and again, I'm just not so sure. And because of the arrested development of her being in prison all these years, we're trying to gain information from her, and I think I have. But overall, I'm not sure how it relates to other school shooters. I'm not, the FBI has taught us that all serial killers think like this and think like that, or that's the perception from their work, which isn't true.
yes.
Just the same with school shooters. That perception isn't true. They're all different, and they do it for different reasons.
I've always found that now, both as doing my own research, my own reading, my own digging deep into things, but also my own experience as a detective, in the Bronx, that you cannot put things into a box. All right. Every individual is so different and are motivated by so many different things. And some who truly are, and again, I'm not talking about school shooters, I'm talking about criminals and human beings in general, but some who can be so criminally evil, if you will, inclined, okay? And others, they're do I want to say victims of their circumstances? I never want to make it okay for the bad guys, because I do believe the bad guys are always to blame. There's no other blame other than the act that you commit, whatever it might be. but they are greatly or vastly different people,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
things
yeah.
like the FBI, and when people try to create statistics and try to decide why, they always want to put it in a box, and that simply is not the case in real life. I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, no, I'm gonna. It is true. We do like to think that when people commit certain types of crime, that that they all end up being in a category, which then makes us believe that they're the same. And I guess we
Yes,
create these categories to make it easier for us to understand, because that's really what this is about. It's about
right.
understanding why somebody would do something so horrible.
Yes,
There's also the human condition. Is it, Brenda is a human. Brenda is an evil human who did something absolutely horrible, but she is
yes,
human. And you run that risk when you write a book about somebody who does something so horrible that changed the lives of so many, um, making them appear to be human. But I'm not apologetic for that. She is a human, and she's being
right.
treated like a human in prison by our penal system in California. She's got a fairly nice lifestyle. Well, within prison reason, she's got a
Yes,
fairly nice lifestyle,
yes.
and I don't personally don't think that she wants to be released. I think she's doesn't know any different. She's been there since she was 16 years old.
Well, like anything, it becomes her home.
Mm,
The little bits that I've seen of her, as far as interviews, or I guess the interview, she's only been interviewed once. To me, at that time, it was very apparent just how institutionalized she was.
mm,
In everything that, we from our prior conversations, everything that she said was kind of what I call PMA, which is a positive mental attitude.
mhm.
This is not how they actually think. It's what they learn. It's learned behavior from all their therapy groups in wanting to make the instructors, the therapists, the whoever happy. They learn to speak this way. And some of them may take to it and may believe it, all right? But quite just like how they all find religion. So many of our incarcerated people find religion. Are they truly religious? Are they just is it just rote? They're reading off the script to make the world happy because this is what you want to hear, but it becomes part of their personality, if you will. And I see that with Brenda in the later years. I wish we could have seen, interviews with her when she was 16 as opposed to when she was whatever it was, 26, 29. I don't know,
Yeah,
you
yeah,
know.
yeah. I don't, again, Brenda, I think Brenda's different than that generic thing. I mean, this is a girl who deliberately got up in the morning, broke two windows out of the front door. The top half of the window door was glass. She broke two of those little windows. Used her BB gun and a long range 22 Ruger with a sight, a scope, and started shooting across the street at anybody who came by. One of the most horrific parts of this is that because she was using a 22, and for those who know guns, that's a ping, ping, ping. That's not a bang, bang, bang.
Yes.
People were pulling up in their cars with the radios playing, the engines going. This is this is early 1979. So they're not racing up in Teslas nice and silent. Some of these cars are loud.
Sure.
They were dropping their children off whilst she was shooting,
Yes.
driving
Yeah.
away, and children were being shot. And she was continuing to shoot as these children were arriving. One parent dropped their child off, got home, clicked on the radio about 20 minutes later to hear there was a shooting, knowing that she had just dropped her two children off during the shooting.
Can you imagine how frightening?
It's just disgusting.
Yeah.
It's horrific. And to know that we've now gone 40 years plus, let's keep counting. Geez, if I do the math on this, it's a long, long time ago, 46 years ago. That's still happening today.
Yes. Yes.
And the reason for the book is to go back and maybe find just even that nugget in the middle of all of the information that might lead us towards understanding why it happens. The cult of the media to drive these people out.
Hmm.
Again, I'm in favor of the Second Amendment, but perhaps maybe some better security on the weapons. I don't know what the answer is, but certainly people still want to wake up on Monday morning and go and shoot children they don't know.
Yes.
And that is the bit that I was trying to really dig in deep to go, why did this 16-year-old girl do it in the same way in which why somebody in their 30s who just did it 8 months ago would want to do it? What's the similarities? We're closer, but again, there's no end to this phenomenon.
Well, and sadly, I don't think it ever will end because back to what we just mentioned 2 minutes ago about individual personalities and how they vary so greatly, number one. Number two, the desire to do this, although we, have here in America, probably, well, most definitely, are the strongest in this phenomenon of school shootings. We have the most school shootings. It has to do with our population, the way our population is made up. The size of our population helps, of course, and of course the Second Amendment helps. All in all, though, that these things, it still comes down to the individual that decides to do this. As you say in the UK where you're living now, how much knife crime do you guys have? Do we have knife crime in America? Absolutely. But for us, again, it's the old, the idiot brings the knife to the gunfight. The
Yeah.
gun is the premier weapon. That's the one you want to get your hands on. With her, again, the weapon was a very small caliber round. Something I want to touch on, that I'm bringing it back up again. I don't want to lose track of what we're talking about. But within her family, her brothers and sister, her mother, her father, okay, her grandparents, extended family that was in Arkansas,
Hmm.
nobody saw a problem with Brenda having this weapon.
Well, but that's not unusual in Arkansas, and
No, it's not.
that's
No.
not that unusual in Southern California either.
Yes.
Let's be
No.
honest.
But my point is like, oh no, we can't give it to her. She's crazy. They were proud that she was a good shot. They
Well,
were proud that she knew how to use a weapon and handle a weapon.
and she proved to her father and brother, and the reason why I bring him in because it is important, is because she proved that she can clean her weapon, take care of it, shoot
Yes.
accurately, behave in a manner in which would a gun owner should. So this BB gun that she had for years, I mean, she had that 3 years.
Hmm.
She proved her point, so that when she asked for the gun, and she will lie and say she asked for a radio, which is not true. She asked for the gun, and her brother and her father got it for her because her brother also bought her a lock for the trigger.
Yes.
So, um, this story that dad bought her a gun so she'd go kill people. Well, not really. It was kind of a family decision, and everybody was okay with
Yes.
it. And also,
Yeah.
she was the only gun owner in the house.
Hmm.
So the father didn't have a weapon. The brother didn't have a weapon. She was the only
Correct.
gun owner, as far as I know. I mean, this is from Brenda's information and from
Well,
her father, which is
let
very
me
unlike other shooters.
let me ask you this too, because I know you'll be more familiar with your own book than I am, but I do believe that you wrote a part where she had said in one of her interviews that her father bought her a rifle so she could kill herself, if I'm not
Okay.
mistaken.
Yeah, she
But
said that.
she, of course, did not kill herself. All right. She also did not shoot her father every time she was unhappy about her father for any number of
Hmm.
reasons.
Hmm.
Okay. She
Hmm.
never shot her father or her brother, her sister, or anybody else, of course, until this day.
Hmm.
Okay.
Hmm.
But the idea that if her father was, and I'm not defending her father, I'm just stating facts,
Yeah, yeah.
if her father was the bad guy in this scenario, which she does on occasion blame,
Hmm.
but she didn't take it out on him with the weapon that he bought for her.
Yeah, there's a bunch to unpack in that. Um, Number one, I think it's ludicrous to suggest that her father bought her a weapon so she'd kill herself. I think that's ludicrous.
Hmm.
Number one, if that was the case, he would buy a handgun because that's far easier to kill yourself than with a rifle that's 3/4 your height.
Yes.
For Brenda
Well,
to
she'd have
shoot
to
her,
pull the trigger with her toe.
yeah, and get it specifically perfectly placed within her head,
Yes.
like it doesn't make sense. Um, Secondly, within the family structure, um, if she were, as she claims later on, and this is a bit of a spoiler alert for the episode, but she claims that her father molested her as a child.
Yes.
I'm not in a position to say that anybody who claims that is a liar. Yes, this is horrible. Let's work through this. And I've spoken to Brenda many times about this. Um, it's not unusual, and again, you've worked in the police force. It's not unusual for someone who is victimized to not hurt the perpetrator in this case.
Oh, no. And quite often still love them.
Yeah, absolutely. Which Brenda does and did, and was very sad when her father passed away, despite making these outlandish claims, which appear to be outlandish, but could very well be true.
Yes.
Um, the only evidence I have for it is that her friends would come over and they all liked Wally, which was her father, Wally Spencer.
Yes.
They all liked him very much, and he was very kind to young girls. And the only information I have is that he was probably a little creepy, but I really don't have any factual information. She never mentioned it for years, but it does offer a little bit of a motive because there was no motive. There was no other reason that Brenda would do what she did. I think
Yes.
we want to put them in categories, as I say. We want to believe that her father molested her because it gives us a reason to understand why she did what she did. I'm
Well,
not so sure.
it creates too, and it's something that not only every criminal wants to do, but oh geez, how do I say this without insulting more than half of our listeners? But every uh, do-gooder wants to believe that there is a blame, you know? So you want to blame the father, you want to blame the school system, you want to blame society, you want to blame drugs, you want to blame alcohol. We can go on and on because we can come up with 1,000 different things that we can blame for everything that even you and I do in
Yeah,
our day-to-day lives.
yeah,
It's never my fault. It's always another reason. Um, Again, as I think I did mention just earlier in our conversation here, is that in the end, the blame always comes down to the bad guy. And in this case, the bad guy is Brenda.
yeah.
Now, as far as her upbringing in general and her father, Wally, I mean, herself and her siblings all decided they would rather live with the father than the mother.
Well, I think that's an easy decision. If you go back, and in California, look, anybody from California will know this, and anybody who's long enough in the tooth will know that California judicial system, especially within the family courts, goes like this, right?
Yeah.
And there's these good times and these bad times, and there's this progressive stuff that happens that doesn't make any sense. They all change their mind, and there's all these sort of groups of families that are victim of this attempt to try and understand what the best thing to do for the children is, right? There's all this crazy stuff that goes on over there in California and many other states. I'll get off my soapbox now. But in
Yeah.
that time in the early 70s, um, you know, it was unusual that a father had custody of the children, but the
Yes.
judge asked the children. And Brenda was the youngest, so she had an older brother and a much older sister, right? Um, they just said, we want to live with dad because dad had no rules. They had their own room.
Yes.
Mom was a bit vacant, you know. Um, it just probably was easy for them to stay where they were living as mom moved out, or, it is what it is. But the judge asked the kids, and the two older ones said they wanted to live with their dad, and Brenda just followed suit.
Hmm.
And the mom didn't seem that upset about it. I mean, she said loads of horrible things about the father, as we expect. They were divorcing, about how he was a weak man who couldn't stand up for himself. Well, weirdly, he stood up for himself quite well in court and managed to get custody of the children. So there's all this sort of anomaly that's going
Yes.
on in that relationship. And there's a point where Brenda, as a young girl who's living with her father, she's riding her bike and she falls off the bike and hits her head really badly and is vomiting and is ill. And, the father was at work. And so they called the mother, and the mother said, well, she's Wally's problem now. So there
Yes.
was this type of separation that happened. And again, not unusual in any family. Well, it is unusual, but it's not unheard of. Multiple families are like this, where you lose contact with a parent, or, there's different types of it's not parallel parenting, there's different types of family structures. And Wally came home and thought, oh, she'll be all right, sleep it off. And then eventually the sister took her to the hospital the following day.
Yes.
So there's sort of like levels of neglect. But on the other hand, I knew loads of kids who fell off bikes, who would, who didn't go on to shoot strangers.
Well,
So,
you know,
if we're looking for reasons, the best reason we've got really is the fact that her father did something horrible to her. And also because she said so. It's the only, of all the years that have gone by, it's the only motive that she's able to come up with, other than I was on drugs, even though her toxicology report was negative. It's
yes.
the only it's the only scenario she's given us. So of course we're going to take it and listen and say, okay, well let's look into that. Um, I don't again I don't know how true it is or how true it isn't, But what happens after Brenda's in prison? The song is released. She's got some fame. She's the face of evil. Characters on TV are made about her.
Yes.
She's this, the long red part down the middle hair with aviator glasses and a skull cap. It's an image we have in many TV characters and probably don't even realize. And I'm talking about Meg Griffin from Family Guy. You probably don't even realize that she's mimicked off of Brenda Spencer.
Yes.
So in the
Yes.
American consciousness, Brenda Spencer is kind of embedded. And if we want to move into what happens when she goes into prison, let's do that. The father starts a relationship with her cellmate. And this is
Bizarro story.
you think the story's over when she goes to prison? You're not even close. The story continues for years. As a little girl, she's younger than Brenda, about 8 months younger. She's 15 and she's gets thrown into juvenile hall in San Diego. She burned down her parents' house. They were moving. She didn't want to move, whatever. Disenfranchised young person. Brenda claims that she attempted to have a relationship with her and idolized her. Don't know how much of that's bravado, don't know. But she also took a shine to Brenda's father, Wally, who was visiting Brenda. So if
Yes.
keeping score at home, Wally is now starting a relationship with Brenda's underage roommate in juvenile hall. Eventually, Sheila gets transferred to an open facility. Wally, almost day one, picks her up, drives her home, moves into Brenda's bedroom at the same house in which Brenda shot
Yes.
people. It's just insane. They then have a child together.
Mm-hmm.
Wally drives her to Arizona with the young girl's mother, because the mother wants to get rid of her as well. She can't wait to get rid of her daughter as well. Another mother who wasn't interested who was done parenting, got to teenage stance and said, I'm done parenting. The mother then went to Arizona with Wally because in Arizona, you only need one parent to marry somebody who's under 16, under 18, sorry. So they sort of have this sort of makeshift shotgun wedding. So the police catch wind that there's this young girl living at Wally's house.
Mm-hmm.
The neighbors see her. She looks like Brenda. They think it's Brenda. They can't believe they've let this school shooter out of prison, so they call the cops. Cops arrive, sort of almost catch him with this underage girl, but because they're married,
It's all legal.
it's all legal.
Yes.
So you're thinking that is odd. Doesn't even hit the radar. Barely hits the news in San Diego.
Yes.
I had to dig deep, went down to the San Diego Public Library to find out some old newspaper articles. It is in the San Diego Union Trib and it is in the LA Times, but only as a page 17 blurb.
Yes.
By today's standard, that would be all over the news. Brenda would have had her not her alibi, but her excuse long before she'd gone to court. But the reason why all this was sort of kept secret at the time was that Brenda was in the middle of her plea bargain. She had pleaded guilty on her father's advice. She had then plea bargained to 25 years to life rather than taking a normal life sentence. Two very odd decisions.
Yes.
But her dad was manipulating her, I believe, or giving her advice, call it what you want, because he didn't want people nosing around the house. He didn't want an investigation to reveal the fact that he was in a relationship with somebody who was underage. So he gave Brenda bad advice, in my opinion, to do the wrong thing. Now she's still in prison, and
Well, now, but counsel went along with this. This was Wally agreed to it, but this was her counsel's advice too, was it not?
well, it's unclear. I mean, McGlynn was a well-known, court-appointed lawyer. I think, we were in uncharted waters. They were changing the law to try her as an adult.
Yes.
So there was this belief that she was still going to be treated as a child once in prison. And in fact, the story goes even deeper. Everyone was naive at this point. This is, again, back on my soapbox, this is California justice in the 70s. This is a strange time.
Yes.
Her lawyer says, well, let's make this deal, give her 25 to life instead of her going through a full trial. And he was told by Brenda and by the father that they didn't want a full trial. So let's plea bargain to 25 to life, plead guilty, on the proviso that she stays in the juvenile center for women until she's 25, because she's very mature. She's a young girl. She doesn't know what she's done. Anyway, so they agree that. But in great California fashion, the penal institution, the DOC, and the courts are two completely separate entities, and one does not have to listen to the other. And
Correct.
on her 18th birthday, which was a year from the day she went into jail or into prison, she was transferred to the central women's prison in Chino, the day of her 18th birthday. So nobody observed this. Wait till she's 25 to move her gradually over. There was no
Mhm.
sort of pastoral care for Brenda as a young girl. She was given drugs because she was called hysterical. That's according to Brenda. She claimed she was put into a rubber room because she wanted to hurt herself. There are all these big bravado claims of what happened to her whilst in prison. And I totally accept the fact that 9 out of 10 people could give a crap what Brenda thinks. And I get that.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
and again, she deserved all these things. She did something horrible. She deserves to be put in the rubber room if she's misbehaving. She deserves all these horrible things to happen to her. But this is the story as it happened and what goes on. Because instead of trying to reveal from her why she did it, what possible motives she might have, they didn't. Instead, they just locked her up and threw away the key. Uh,
Yes.
I think that's where our mistake is. I think that's where that it's a bit shallow and lacks foresight from the Department of Corrections in California. On the other hand, there were no psychologists beating down the door to talk to her. And so she carried with this sort of mentality for another sort of 12, 13 years, and then even went into she demanded to do interviews with the local media in the early
Yes.
90s. And you can find it on YouTube. She has this fantastic mullet. I mean, it really is a period of,
Yes. I've seen it. I've watched it. Yes.
oh, it's just a fantastic mullet. She's embarrassed about it now. She jokes about it. I guess as anyone would with such a tremendous ginger mullet. Anyway, and she talks about how she was on heavy drugs and she thought the police were coming after her and she shot in fear. And it's just nonsense. And she still hadn't learned anything from that time. And I think it was only maybe another 10 years later that she revealed that things were not so brilliant at home and her dad had done horrible things and this could probably be the motive for why I did it and I wanted to die by suicide by cop, which is this it's this idea that I'm too chicken shit to kill myself, so I'm going to go out and kill a bunch of innocent people so the cops rock up and then kill me as if
And
it's
also is a very,
a way. Yeah.
well, it's a very modern, okay, or post. It's post her time. It's after her time that this vernacular came out. Nobody said this in the 70s.
Agreed. Agreed. Agreed.
It's a new thing. And again, kind of what we were just talking about earlier, how she's now seeking blame. It wasn't me, it was this, and
Yeah.
part of it is exactly that, finding the modern twists to her case.
I think she's quite happy in prison. She's made some friends. She's had more than a half a dozen parole hearings. I went to one, I think, just last February. It's all online now. It's brilliant the way they do it. You can be anywhere in the world and go to parole hearings. In this last parole hearing, and she comes up with new stuff every parole hearing. She claims she was on heroin, out of the blue, from
Yeah.
nowhere. There's no. She's never said this before. It's a brand new bit of information. I don't know where a 16-year-old living in a moderate home in San Diego who doesn't have a job and her dad was as tight as it gets, how she
Yeah.
manages to get a lot of money for heroin. I'm no authority on hard drugs, but I know drugs are expensive. And
Yes. Well, and especially for a teenage girl, and especially to come up with this, what, 45, 46 years
yeah.
after the fact.
So again, just put this on the list of stuff that's probably unlikely. And
Yeah.
this is where it leads us to this part about her being molested as a child by her father as being a motive. She's told so many things that were untrue along the way that we don't know what to believe now. And when she came up with that story, you're like, okay, well that's plausible and that's believable considering Wally is a mega creep marrying, her cellmate. So that hold on a second, this one could be true. But then when you delve into the full story, it then becomes more elaborate and it changes. And you know, if Brenda really wanted to get out of prison, I think we talk about what you have to do to fool the parole board because and I'll put my hands up because that is what it is, right? I mean,
Oh, yeah.
it's Shawshank Redemption, isn't it? You go in with the truth, they leave you in. You go in with some nonsense, they release you. You know, she's not even trying to hornswoggle the parole board. She's just coming up with anything. And when I asked Brenda, I go, Brenda, what are you doing? Do you want some advice on how to possibly represent yourself? Because I know Brenda differently. I know Brenda. She's a little girl in a 63-year-old woman's body. She's
Yes.
morbidly obese. She has no teeth. She can barely see. She's she's diabetic and not dealing with it very well. She can barely walk. She wears a high-vis jacket when she goes around the prison. She's in a group of people called the Golden Girls because she's like the third oldest person
Yes.
in the prison.
Yes.
Um, is she a threat to anybody else? Probably not. I don't even think she could hold a rifle. Is she going to hurt anybody else? Probably not. Do I think she's a threat to society? No, probably not. But is it possible that she could get out and hurt someone else? Well, yeah, it is. I'm not sure what she would do, but it would be hurt in some way. She's more than likely to come out of prison probably hurt herself.
Yes.
So I think she's safe in that
Or
environment.
just end up homeless anyway.
Yeah, or whatever. I mean, actually, probably not in the state of California. Again, they have these wonderful programs for people to get out of prison to go into Crossroads and live out their days. They actually have really
Hmm.
good programs, especially for women who they go into Crossroads. There's churches that support them, and they even have an agreement with parts of Reno where they can move to somewhere that's more affordable for them to live. It's actually fairly. I know I'm harsh on California for some ways, but they have a lot of very good programs as well, and that is
Right.
one of them.
Right.
My thought on this is that let justice do what justice does. I'm a believer that it's the best system in the world. It's better than all the alternatives. Let them decide what's right for Brenda, but I believe she doesn't want to get out. She
Right.
knows what she did was wrong. She believes she apologized, even though again, positive mental attitude, the way she wrote the letters to the victims. You just don't know where you are with Brenda. And I don't think that Brenda knows who she is either. I
Oh,
don't.
well, she's been lost. She's been lost there. I can't imagine, and I'm not trying to be sympathetic to her at all because in the end, I'm not. Okay, understand that. But imagine, being 16 years old, you're barely a formed human being to begin with, and then you're stuck in a cell for the rest of your life.
Yeah, and
You're not going to grow. You're
yeah,
not going to grow in that environment.
it's that arrested development, and we've seen it so many times with other
Yes.
prisoners. The thing that pisses me off about Brenda the most, and this isn't something I've really talked about, but I've just finished new chapters to the book. It gets re-released in April with a forward, new information about Brenda's most recent parole hearings and what she's up to. Um, what pisses me off about it most is that she's just bold-faced lying to me about not having a memory of the shooting.
Yes.
She in the book, and I don't delve into this in the book, but if you but you can gather it, is that she comes up with a lot of memories of other things that are happening at the same time with the shooting, i.e., what she ate, riding
Yes.
the police car, what she did that morning. It's just that sort of blocked out half-hour time frame where she's firing away like a mad woman at
Yes.
innocent people across the street that I have no memory because I was on drugs. Well, bullshit, bullshit, Brenda. And until you confess, actually confess to this, um, I don't think anyone's going to take you seriously, and you're certainly not going to get out of prison, and nor should you. She needs to be seriously repentive. She needs to be honest when she talks about the crime, and she needs to sort of really look at herself, and she's not going to be able to. She doesn't have the mental capacity at this stage. It's gone. She's in her 60s. I think she's just watching the watch now for.
She didn't strike me, again, the little that I know of her, and maybe you can add to this, as a particularly sharp individual to begin with. In other words, unintelligent. I don't think she was by any means, mentally retarded. But
Okay.
I do believe that she was, probably below average IQ. What do you think about that?
Well, I don't know. I think she's about average, to be fair.
About average,
Um,
okay.
Brenda's not doolally. If I can use that expression,
Yes.
you said mentally retarded, so I feel doolally is probably not nearly as bad as that.
Yeah.
She she's not. Again, I don't know 16-year-old Brenda, but watch
Yeah.
the video again. You can Google Brenda Spencer 1991, and it will come up on YouTube. Watch the interview with her in 1991. She's coherent. She
Oh,
has
yes, yes.
documents. I don't think she's as dumb as that, actually. she's smart enough to not repeat the truth.
Right.
Or in her mind, she's crafty enough, let's put it that way, which hasn't done her any favors, unless she doesn't want to get out of prison. And she knows she's just doing the catchphrase and ticking the boxes for all the folks at prison who want to help her, and she's just going.
Which is so often the case.
And then
So
she
often
gets to
the
the
case.
parole board and drops these heroin bombs or drops these other things, and
Hmm.
everyone in the room is sort of gobsmacked and throw their heads back and say, "What are you talking about?" And
Yeah.
it's at that point where I don't know what to think. And she certainly hasn't helped us at all understand the mind of a school shooter. And I think for that, I think I'll forever be annoyed with her for.
Yes.
Um, you know, I've written a book about you. We've tried to understand, and you haven't helped in this process. If you want to have any redemption, I mean, any glimmer of being forgiven for what you did, I'm not sure anyone can, but if you want to have just a glimmer of it, you need to really confess to this
Yeah.
because you did it and you said you did it and we know you did it. So
Yes.
tell us why and get on with it. And I think the sooner you do, the better you're going to be as well in prison. And if
I
you
agree.
don't want to get out of prison, this could help you not get out of prison.
Yeah.
But it's just frustrating, and you can probably hear the frustration in my voice. I've been working with her for a long time, and we're nowhere close.
Yeah. On that note, my friend, we're going to take a real quick break. Okay? We're going to come back, everybody, in 2 minutes. 2 minutes.
Hey, how you doing? It's me again, another nobody, Travis Myers. And today we're going to talk whiskey. I know most of you think of me as an all-American patriotic type guy, and you are right. But when it comes to whiskey and drinking whiskey, which I do, I always go for the Irish stuff. And my choice when it comes to the Irish stuff is Powers Irish Whiskey. Established back in 1791. It's a triple distilled, oak-aged whiskey. Powers is simply magic. It also happens to be the #1 selling whiskey in Ireland, which has got to say something, because if it's good enough for the Irish, it's good enough for you. So the next time you raise a glass, fill it with Powers, and think of me, another nobody, Travis Myers. This is a 2024 American Eagle gold coin, which I bought along with several others last year. I'm very happy to report that its value has gone up over 40% in the first year. See, I was encouraged to buy some gold by a financial advisor friend who suggested I be more diversified with my investments. She said gold and silver was a very safe place to park some money, as well as a good hedge against inflation. So I took her advice, and all I can say is I wish I had bought more, as it's been so very, very good to us so far. Now, I purchased these gold coins from the good people over at stackingboise.com, who could not have been nicer, more knowledgeable, or more helpful. Now, I'm certainly no financial expert, but I will say from experience, if you're looking to make an investment, buy yourself some gold. And some real gold that you could hold in your hand, just like this coin you see here. And if you do, then do like I did and get with the good folks over at stackingboise.com. I'm telling you, they're good people, they took good care of me, and they'll take good care of you. Again, that's stackingboise.com. And hey, tell them Travis sent you. Hey there, true crime fans. Let me introduce you today to the Cold Case Initiative. The Cold Case Initiative is a foundation that donates money to smaller police agencies all over the country. It does this in order to offset the costs of scientific, forensic, and DNA testing with the hope of solving cold case homicides and other horrific violent crimes that otherwise would remain unsolved. Please, if you have it in your heart and a little money to spare, go to www.coldcaseinitiative.org. Again, that's www.coldcaseinitiative.org, and lend a hand where it truly is needed. Be a part of solving a cold case. Every little bit helps. know that 100% of the donations that go to the Cold Case Initiative go to agencies that are desperately in need of the help. So please, if you can, do the right thing and make a donation. Thanks, and all the best, my friends.
All right, here we are, back with Nick Hunt, the man who wrote the book, I Don't Like Mondays. We're talking about the Brenda Spencer case from 1979. And we just went through, this has been a great conversation so far, Nick. Thanks again for coming on. I really, really appreciate it. Something I like to maybe back up a little bit, though, after everything we've talked about. And if you could kind of describe the day, kind of blow for blow what happened during the attack, if you will.
Again, I'm just going to begin. There's a lot of detailed information in what I'm going to say. And, children were shot in this story. And the first thoughts when I wrote this book was about the victims. Well, the children were shot. I don't think it's fair to completely name all of them. There were 8 children that were shot. There was a police officer named Robert Robb who was shot in the neck, who survived. Burton Ragg, who was the principal, a career educator known as Bert, big smiley guy. The happy Americana teacher who opens the gate and lets children in the morning. This is Bert Ragg. The dude was a legend. He was close to retirement, and he decided to go back to an elementary school because, he just loved working with children and educating them. And this was the school he chose to be at, a real sort of lovely Spielberg-esque neighborhood. This is classic America, classic California, with ranch-style single-story homes as far as the eye could see. The other gentleman who was shot that day in the chest was the custodian, former Korean War veteran, big guy, Mr. Mike, they called him. He was a custodian. Yes. But again, he wasn't the creepy custodian that we think about in the movies. Mr. Mike was a guy, again, kind of had retired. And he went to work at the school to help his local community. He just lived around the corner, and this was kind of fun for him. He got to hang out. He was friendly with everybody. And the kids adored him. Great, big, strong guy. There was nothing he couldn't fix and nobody he couldn't help. He was shot and killed that day as well. So I wanted to begin there, but then go into the story. Yes. So thanks for that. Monday morning, San Diego, January. It's cold by San Diego standard, but it's actually quite a nice day. The kids are kind of rocking up wearing a jacket, but probably by about 11 o'clock, the sun will burn off the clouds, and it will be just another glorious San Diego day. The kids will be in T-shirts running around. So when you hear it's wintertime, that really is it's a misnomer, because actually it's a San Diego winter, which doesn't really count.
It's not what we go through in New York here.
Yeah. I live in the UK. San Diego winters are nothing like it is out here. Yes. So kids walking to school, and this is exactly a suburban school as you'd see on any television show back in the 70s, 80s, 90s. It is literally, sort of a pinky, sort of browny stucco front to the school, flat rooftop. There's ivy that lines the fence along the road. Kids are just walking in the front and around the back. Parents are dropping kids off around the school. It's a really normal school scene for Southern California. Brenda's house was directly across the street. So her front door faces what is essentially the car park. Now, from her front window, on the left, you could see the sort of kindergarten area. And on the right was the main entrance for the elementary school, which was first grade through sixth grade. Brenda decides that morning to load up her weapons, break the glass on the front of her door, and shoot across the street as children are arriving. Immediately, and we spoke about this early in the episode, she starts taking the kids down. The adults come out to save the children as they're running around. The police get the notification, the call. They have to drive from downtown San Diego, which is about a 15-minute drive. And of course, 8 o'clock in the morning was the shift change. So some people were driving home. And again, as a police officer, you'll know what shift change is. I hear shift change. I think of people clocking in and clocking out. I'm not sure how it works. But either way, I don't know if that was the best of times or worst of times, because people who were leaving shift were turning around and coming back, and people who were starting shift were going directly there instead of going to the police station.
The picture that you're trying to paint, it's a very, very busy very loud
Yes.
moment in time, during the day when she takes action. And it helps to cover what she's doing because, again, small caliber weapon, firing it from
Yeah.
inside the house through the window, much of that noise is going to remain within the house.
Yeah.
So most of these people had no idea what was happening while it was happening. I'm sorry, go ahead.
No. Thanks for correcting me there. It's 8 a.m.
Yeah.
So this is the rush hour.
Mm-hmm.
So the main roads around are rush hour. The police have to fight through the rush hour. And there's some interesting bits here about San Diego at that time. Is that in 1979, San Diego did not have 911. San Diego did not have paramedics. San Diego did not have SWAT unit. San Diego did not, the police did not have bulletproof vests. There are a bunch of things that you didn't have in San Diego. Even though it was, well, in the 80s, the fastest growing city in America, it was still a very down home, local kind of place. It felt like a small town. And this was one neighborhood within this small town, even though San Diego is a massive city now. At
Yes.
the time, and it was a big city then, it was really overshadowed by Los Angeles and very close to the Mexican border. So, again, that's not important, but lots of young families lived along this road. So the school was busy and the road was busy. And the police finally made their way there. And one of the greatest pieces of heroism happened that day. And I don't know if we've had anything close in any school shooting in American history, but a fantastic police officer called Ted Kazaknak recognized that people had been shot. And while the police were coming in through the back of the school police were operating the ambulances then, to rescue, Robert Robb, the officer, was attending to the principal and the custodian who were shot in the chest and killed. He took a bullet to the neck. So Brenda was shooting the adults in the chest and neck, and the children were being shot in the lower extremities. He took the bullet and managed to get the gurney away. But Ted Kazaknak noticed, hold on, the bullets are coming from that house across the street. He radios in, he lets them know, and then he commandeers a garbage truck,
Yes.
a big, what do you call it? Garbage truck. Is that what you call them out there?
Garbage truck, yes.
Yeah, garbage truck. A big, huge garbage truck. And he commandeers it. Imagine that today. Look, Travis, imagine commandeering a car. It just wouldn't happen.
I actually, in my time, had on 2 occasions commandeered taxi cabs.
Okay.
And
Okay.
yes,
So
I mean, you do what you got to do. It's quick thinking. What are we going to do? You take care of business. But I'm sorry, go
I
ahead.
agree, but I think in today's world, certainly that would not happen where I live, and I'm
Yeah.
not sure that it would happen in San Diego. A cop says, "I need this vehicle," you'd go, Anyway,
Yeah.
he gets into this vehicle, drives it into harm's way, and parks it in front of the school and the access to the school, blocking Brenda's view of shooting more people who were hiding. So the
Mhm.
single action saved a bunch of lives.
Sure, absolutely.
He then hides behind the wheel to try to keep eye on the building to say, is she still firing? Snipers are arriving. All these former military, San Diego's a big military town. Lots of military now work for the police. They're all arriving. The snipers are getting onto the buildings. They try to call the house. The line is engaged. They can't get Brenda inside the house. They soon find out that, well, my father, who worked for the San Diego Tribune at that time, the San Diego Evening Tribune, his team were going out for the day to get their stories. They had a 10 a.m. deadline to get the news out for the afternoon. And he was trying to grab any last story he could to put the newspaper together. He was an editor. He hears about the shooting. He tells one of his reporters to make a phone call over to the area and get any information you can. We can get it in the afternoon edition. It's news people. It's what they do.
Mhm.
He calls the house. He finds the house. He gets the number from back in the old days. You had the white pages for any
Yes,
children.
yes.
For any children who are listening, it's this great big book like the internet that you have to rifle through with your thumb to find a number. They had
So here we are, 2 old guys who are waxing romantic here. You mentioned the evening edition of the newspaper because
yeah,
we used to have 2 newspapers a
Yeah.
day, which they don't have anymore, a morning and an evening, and a phone book. Yes, go
that's
ahead.
right. It's where we got our news before we relied on TikTok. Anyway, so that's a joke, by the way. No one
Yes.
relies on TikTok for news. And if you do rely on TikTok for news, you got bigger problems. So he calls over to the house, and Brenda answers the phone. And the reason why the phone's been engaged is because the reporters are talking to her, my dad's team. So they're chatting away to her. First, she answers the phone, and they say, "Hey, look, there's a shooting in the area. Have you seen anything?" And she goes, "Yeah, it's me," and then hangs up the phone. They then call back, and she answers. And they say, "Well, why are you doing this?" And she says, "Well, I don't like Mondays. This just livens up the day." And boom, infamy. Now, it's a famous expression. It gets out of the news right
Yes.
away. Even before she gives up eventually, 6 hours later, they manage to talk her out of the house, and she leaves without another shot being fired. So almost as Ted Kazignak pulls the van up and the phone rings, Brendan never fires another shot. So the connection of two things that were happening, early intervention from the police to actually do something, a
Mhm.
show of force, and of course the distraction. So by hook or crook, whatever it was, it worked this day, and I think it saved multiple lives because Brenda, from her vantage point, people are starting to congregate around the area. People heard about this and they'd driven over, and this is a heavily populated area. There's dozens and dozens and dozens of houses as far as the eyes can see. They're all sort of cookie cutter homes. It's like the track home. They are coming and looking over fences, and she could have easily have shot for hours from that location and hit people who
Sure.
were on looking. And even where the
Absolutely.
police had put up the boundary at the end of the road, Brenda could have stepped to another window at the house and shot and reached people. She didn't. Whether she was distracted by the police who were engaging with bullhorns out in front, or whether it was from the fact that the school was blocked, or that she had had enough, or that the reporters were asking her questions and she realized she was now going to be famous, which might be what she wanted all along. You know, she did ask, the newspapers, "Am I going to be in the paper?" She answered the phone whenever they called. So time ticks on. They cut off the power. They do all the things in the house. And eventually the police call the house. They speak to her. They navigate her out. There's some famous images of her coming out. And she's carrying two weapons, the BB gun and the .22 rifle that her father got her for Christmas just
Correct.
a month before. She lays both weapons down on the ground. I think, the BB gun lays testament to her ability to understand what she was doing, because the BB gun wasn't going to kill anybody. And then the negotiators has her go back in and get the ammunition, which is quite remarkable. I would have thought as soon as you come out, grab her, you're done. But he felt, no, I
Absolutely.
need to bring the ammunition because that's the nail in the coffin. Essentially, she is now banged to rights. Here's the weapon. Here's the bullets. There is
Yeah.
nothing. She did it. She's acting alone. That house is empty. So the story kind of begins there because Brenda's 16. She's under 18. She can only be tried as a child, but this is probably the worst crime in San Diego history. Well, worst crime in 50 years in San Diego. Um, and Brenda now goes into infamy. And this was a very nice neighborhood, tree lined, ranch style homes. A school across the street was with a great reputation. This is any Main Street, USA. There's nothing unusual about this area.
That's something that I find so interesting about the school shooter thing as a whole, though. Okay. And, uh, myself grew up a working poor kid, single mother, streets of New York City, high school dropout, et cetera, et cetera. I all kinds of friends who were mixed up in drugs, guys in the end who ended up getting mixed up with homicides and all kinds of things, real New York City street life kind of stuff. Nobody would ever be a school shooter or to go this far, number one. But number two is that all of these school shooters do tend to come from a fairly, if you will, upper middle class scenario from my view. When I say, it's not that their parents aren't hardworking people or that, life isn't tough in some respect, but there's nothing obvious that would say, oh, this poor deprived child. Doesn't seem to ever be the case when it comes to the school shooters.
Well, we want to believe that.
Yeah,
And I think the media, if we can get into what happened next, because the media
please.
frenzy, like any massive event, the media wants to get the story and be the first and get the breaking, exclusive. They rock up and they're there before she's even exiting the house. and
Hmm.
they're interviewing children as they're getting home from school, or they're interviewing parents who are worried, waiting to hear news about whether their children were shot today. And I don't blame them for that. They need to get the news. But they start to print stuff that doesn't really have any basis.
Hmm.
So it makes us feel better that Brenda Spencer, used to cut tails off cats or burn cats or shoot birds and, was known to be a druggie, even though some of that stuff wasn't true. She did shoot squirrels and birds. Her father had some land at the edge of town where he owned, and they would go and
Hmm.
shoot things there in a controlled environment. They were known as the weird family, according to some of the people on the street, which might very well be true. But in my neighborhood when I lived in California, we had at least 5 weird families on our street. But one not more weirder than the others. The media went deep into the father and how apparently he was poor and drunk and didn't have any time for his children nor care for them. And the evidence would suggest something different. Yes, he was absent in many ways and didn't know how to deal with the situation, but he was home, and he took his daughter
Yes.
to school on many occasions, and he took her home, and he I'm not going to say he tried his best, because he could have got better help for certain situations, but he certainly wasn't completely absent, and he wasn't a drunk. There was no alcohol found in the house, even though Milwaukee Journal or New York Times or some newspaper prints that the house was covered in alcohol, even though
Yes.
that's inconsistent with the police report. I'm not sure who told them that or why they printed it, but it's not true. There was no alcohol in the house. It was not the father's gun. It was a gift for her. It was hers and hers alone. They just create this narrative because it makes us feel better, I guess, even though it's untrue. And even to this day,
It sells papers.
I guess, yes,
You know,
but I think the truth itself sells papers, because
I agree. No.
actually what happens is truly remarkable, with the father, hitching up with the former cellmate, and then the song arrives in 2 months. The Boomtown
Yes.
Rats produced this
Yes.
song, "I Don't Like Mondays." It was a massive hit. It was #1 over here in the UK, and I think 8 other countries. It was huge. He wrote it and then went to San Diego to perform it, and I think British artists would love to crack America. And at that time, it was all about cash for chaos. So, if the more trouble you cause, the more newspapers you get into, the more
Yep.
money you make. Um, and I think they just jumped on that opportunity to release that song, and it put Brenda in infamy. It made her far more famous than I think she'd bargained for. I think she wanted to be, locally famous, and she'd brag to her best friend, who was called Brant Fleming, who lived next door, who'd moved away. She had bragged to a few other people. Um, but I think now she found herself in a world of hurt in prison, and she just put up the blockers and the defense mechanism, and we've gleaned nothing from her over the years.
Yes.
The media continue to tell the story and will continue to perpetuate the lie. Wikipedia, which is just a fucking joke,
Oh, well,
continues.
Wikipedia is a pack of lies.
It's just a joke.
It's
I mean, they
graceful.
continue to pump out this story from the New York Times or the Milwaukee Journal about her upbringing and all that. It just isn't true. The dad wasn't broke. He had a full-time job and had paid off his mortgage, and in fact was buying land in the South County. So,
Well, that was a bit of my point there about kind of the standard, if you will, of the shooter, including Brenda, who these kids are not destitute by any means.
yeah,
When reading your book, I was surprised to find what do I want to say, nice, normal life she seemed to have, that they owned multiple properties, that the father did have a full-time, well-paying job and took care of himself and, his children on that job all by himself. I'm sorry, go ahead.
no, no. I mean, again, they weren't wealthy people, but they certainly
Mhm.
weren't the poorest on the street. And he was just tight. He was just cheap. You
Yeah.
know, which doesn't make him a bad guy. Loads of other things he did makes him a bad guy, but
Mhm.
that doesn't make him a bad guy. And weirdly, in his deluded mind, rewarding Brenda with the rifle was the right thing to do because she had proved that she can maintain a weapon with her BB gun, which she had for years and years and years. She had proved herself, and she was doing well at school, and she had just won a photography award, and things were kind of looking on the up. So he bought her the gift for Christmas because she deserved it.
Well, that's where, and I'm not pushing back on you, but I guess maybe I am a little bit. I mean, it's something that every year, thousands of children, when I say children, thousands of teenagers, will receive a Christmas or a birthday present of a rifle because that's what their family does. They're shooters, they're hunters, they're whatever, and there's nothing wrong with it. It's the way that they grow up, And back to the family life, if it weren't for Brenda on this day, losing it in whatever way she did, we would have never, ever heard of the Spencers. They would have been the most benign, average people on the planet. She would have eventually grown, married, had her own children, same with her brothers and sisters. It just would have been, again, as average, if not even below average existence as possible.
The newspaper reports, you'll read everywhere. Again, Wikipedia is probably the best place to start if you want to read the first line from the first line. Wally lived, she lived alone with her father. Not true.
Yes.
Her brother lived there. He had a room there. He was on holiday for 2 weeks, came home to find his sister had shot up the school. So just the premise is that we want to believe that Brenda was a heavily drug user who killed animals, who fit all these molds, who father gave her this gun knowing that she was going to do this, and they were just these hillbilly types that drank alcohol, and he didn't care about his kids, and they lived alone in this house, and then later that he was molesting her and that this was a cry for help. There's this big narrative that they want to paint, but really the truth is that's not what happened. And we see it again in Columbine. When Columbine happened, and there is no connection between these two things other than Columbine children were killed, and in this case, children were killed.
Correct.
Or children were shot. They created the trench coat mafia, which didn't exist.
Yes.
That didn't happen. They just
Correct.
fabricate this because it makes us feel better that there was some conspiracy or plot that was right in plain sight that we didn't see. And I think it muckies the water. So that when we really talk about school shootings, we're talking, and specifically teenage school shooters, we're talking about disenfranchised youth, and there's a reason why they choose to express themselves this way. And I'm not saying that we can crack this case if we just tell the truth. No, because we have told the truth and we still don't know. But I am saying that we need to start at the beginning and kind of really check it out and look at what similarities there may be to even just glimmer some hope in slowing it down or stopping it. I also think that huge weaponry is not a great idea for youth. I mean, again, you and I may argue on the gun issue, and I believe in the Second Amendment. I just don't know why you need a massive rifle. And the law is 18, and Brenda was 16, and she was given a gun at 16. To me, that's the law. And I accept that it happens all over rural America, and it happens in rural Britain as well. Children have shotguns who work on farms, and I accept that. But the law in San Diego at that time, and certainly in the city where she didn't need the rifle, or it should have been in the care of the father, or whatever rule they want to set up, there wasn't one. And if we look at the case of the Crumleys, where the parents are involved, they knew what could happen by giving a child a weapon, and Wally is definitely guilty of something. Her father, Wally, is guilty of something.
Sure.
I'm not sure what, but his behavior was poor after the fact, and I think he could have done better as a father beforehand, even though nothing is abundantly obvious. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. Well, and if we could go back to the little bit that his wife said about him, about being a weak human being, and maybe he allowed his children to run roughshod on him. Maybe he gave them too much freedom. He wasn't enough of a disciplinarian. It certainly didn't sound like he was over.
Certainly wasn't over. Yeah. But
yes.
when she's talking to the police or to the reporters, she does say, whilst during the shooting, mind you, and this is quite an absurd scenario. She's literally moments ago was killing people.
Yes.
And is speaking to the reporters saying, "Oh, my dad will be so angry if he hears about this."
Yes.
It just adds to the point that her immaturity, not understanding, and yet her father gave her rifles. That's my point on that. Is that
Yeah.
he would have known more than anyone of her maturity level, and he gave her a rifle.
In the end, though, Nick, I think with all of these cases, we could name dozens of them.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I don't think there ever will be an answer, or at least a simple answer, and not to make light of it or to quote the song, but, will we ever know what made that
Yeah,
silicone chip inside her head, switch to overload? We'll never know, and
silicon chip.
exactly.
Can we talk about the song? I mean, it's a great tune.
Absolutely.
It's
Yeah,
a great
please, go
tune,
ahead.
but and the only thing I want to say about the Bob Geldof thing and the Boomtown Rats, because that's who we're talking about here for the song. For a guy who had one hit, he sure has a lot of money.
Yes. Yes, he does.
I'm not saying that Live Aid or Band Aid was anything untowards, but for a dude who had one hit in 1979 and 1980 that didn't even sell in America.
Right.
he
I think
sure-
it just broke the top 100 here in America.
He sure has a lot of money.
hmm Sounds like another book on the way.
I don't know what it means, but
Yeah.
I wonder what else he did in his career that would have got him so much money, because it wasn't the music.
Right.
It
No, in
wasn't
fact,
there.
I can't. Other than what is it? What was that? What was that Live Aid song? Do they even know it's Christmas? Is that what it was called? Something like that?
You mean this song for charity?
Yes. Is that not it?
Mm,
Yeah. Well,
it is. It's
do
a
they even
song
know it's
for-
Christmas?
It's a
Yes.
song for charity.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's all. That's all
And
I'm saying. I'll just look.
and I
let's
don't
move
like
on.
Mondays. I can't think of anything else that the Boomtown Rats did.
There's
And I'm a
not-
punk rock guy.
Yeah. He had another mild hit here in the UK only before that, and
Mhm.
look, I don't blame him for wanting to write a song that would make him famous. I don't blame him for that.
Yeah.
But he reappropriated the song at Live Aid, which was the
Yes.
only song he sang at Live Aid. He reappropriated it for feeding starving Africans. The
Yes.
lesson today is how to die, is the lyric that he reappropriated for something else. Now, for San Diegans, hey, whatever, it's music, whatever. Bob being Bob, oh, you knucklehead, you're such a crazy guy taking those songs. I take that personal.
Yes.
Being involved in this shooting, my father was the editor who edited the story. I was a 10-year-old at the time, like all of my friends, and then to see Bob Geldof on stage at Wembley reappropriate a song that was about children being shot
Yes.
into "Give Us Your Money,"
Yes.
it just falls shallow with me. And I've got 4 chapters in the book that my opinion's in there. I don't blame Bob, but you know what, dude, I think you missed that one. I think you blew it on that case. And again, if you if you want 4 chapters of my opinion on Bob Geldof, it's in the book. But I think I've just summed it up for you. Anyway, let's move on now. I'm incriminating myself.
Yeah. No, but in the end, I don't think that there is an answer
No.
to all of this. I don't think it's going to end, here with guns, or maybe in the UK with knives, or anywhere else around the world, because this does happen in other countries, and I don't see a proper end.
Well, kids on
to it at all.
drugs is an interesting one. Kids on drugs
Yes.
is the one that we always, again in '79 we were certain that Alice Cooper's song "School's Out" was a contributing factor.
Right.
And she was a massive Alice Cooper fan.
Yes.
So I think people, and Ozzy Osbourne, another legend over here, is always linked to some sort of crime or something. If you listen to Ozzy, you therefore must be some psychopath Satanist.
Well, I don't buy into any of that either, because I've listened to all those songs myself, and I've never had the inclination to do something like this.
But in the '70s, this was the belief, because we were still we were like 20 years outside of Elvis. Do you know what I mean? So
Yes.
Elvis, Shake, Rattle, and Roll apparently made teenagers go crazy. And so when Alice Cooper writes "School's Out" forever, of course, that song hit the charts again. And Brenda was a massive Alice Cooper fan, so they look deep into that. But if you really look at the man, "School's Out" was what, 1974, 75? It was like 4 years before this. So, there's a whole idea that if she heard a song and then immediately went out and acted, it's just, again, wants the want of people to find a reason for why this stuff happens, and the blame game of all the different stuff. It just wasn't going to be. You know, her neighbors and friends said that she was taking her father's prescription drugs, but he was not on anything so heavy that would even taken in mass, she'd probably pass out before she had the inclination to pick up a gun and actively shoot. It was revealed that she had seizures in her sleep when she was in prison, which is something maybe the father didn't even know. She
Yes.
would, it's very possible. So she was given some medication for that whilst in prison. The doctor said, look, this could not be a contributing factor. Millions of people have this condition and don't do what she did. So this search for the idea, and today we talk about children, taking various different, well, I guess for the mental health crisis we're in Britain as well, a lot of people are taking the different types of drugs, happy pills, we'll call them whatever. I know Americans have these loads more expressions for them than we do here in the UK. I don't know if there's enough evidence from, say, 2000 to now to say that they have a factor, simply because, well, I can think of a couple school shooters that I speak to since that time who weren't on any pills, but also so many
Who were
children
not on any pills?
who were not on any pills.
So when I had read then that 100% of school shooters since what was it, Columbine, had
Which is
been on
when?
some sort of.
Sorry, when was Columbine?
Columbine was 99.
Okay.
All right.
Yeah.
I believe it was 99. I could be wrong about that. I'm sure somebody will write in and correct me.
Yeah.
But since then, when it really took off, this is 20 years after
Yeah.
this case we're talking about now, the Brenda Spencer case. But when it really took off after Columbine, that 100% were on some sort of SSRI, which again is antidepressant medication.
Okay.
But you're saying that they
Well,
weren't, or that they're saying that they weren't?
Well, I'll give two examples that I know that I speak with. One is Eric
Okay.
Houston, who in Olivehurst, California, Northern California, he was a school shooter, 19 years old, not on any drugs. Even in San Diego, there's Andy Williams, who at Santana High School, just around the corner from where Brenda shot in 2001.
Right.
He was, I think, just turned 15. He wasn't on any drugs. He was 22, shot from the bathroom, killed two. So I don't know if that's true, and I also don't know how they would know. Medical records are sealed. I think there's assumptions being made.
Yeah.
I don't know. And look, I also this thing that I get a lot now from America is about the transgender issue, because there has been a spate of transgender shooters,
Yes.
or connected to the community, or however you want to link that.
Trans adjacent. There's a new word
Okay,
for you.
I don't know. I just, for me, there's, again, the amount of disenfranchised youth who are part of that community.
Yes.
I think it's the disenfranchised part rather than the other. And I don't know if there's enough evidence to suggest that trans people are more or less likely. I don't know. I don't think there's enough evidence to certainly jump on that wagon. But the disenfranchised part is the concern.
Well, I think it does. I think in my, for whatever it's worth, what Travis thinks is that for the most part, I think we would find that 99% of these, I hate to say children, teenagers, are self-hating people who are seeking attention at all costs. So some of them may want to punish the world, but more than anything, they want to punish themselves. They're not happy with themselves. They hate everything. They hate their families. They hate their schoolmates. They just hate everything around them. And so at this time, it might not even be something that is drilled into them constantly, where they come up with this. But at this time, again, like the song says, that switch flips.
Yeah.
And they take action, and quite often then they're like, holy shit, what have I done? But it's too late, because they've taken action.
I hear what you're saying. I just don't know if the connection to school shootings is a relevant one.
Right.
I don't know if there's enough information or evidence. Again, there's all this stuff that I'm getting now, the way the political shift is happening with the anti-Christianity piece. I know
Yes.
that when Nashville happened and it was a young girl who was transitioning into a young man,
Man, yes.
Audrey, she attacked a school and specifically chose a Catholic school to do
A
her
school that
attack.
she attended.
Yeah. So,
Yeah.
again, I don't know if there's connections yet. I just don't know if the evidence is there yet. I mean,
Mm.
I just don't see it. I don't want to jump to any conclusion and sort of say, oh, it is that easy. It is that obvious. Duh. We should all see the signs, because I just don't think it's that easy.
No, I agree.
They talk about warning signs. At any given time, you may know, 2 or 3 friends at school who are showing the warning signs.
Oh,
We are,
absolutely.
as a society in America and in Britain, we are influx with youth who are showing the typical FBI decided signs of a school shooter. I have a family member who is, without question, is showing all of the traits, young, disenfranchised teenager of a school shooter. But we're dealing with that within a family, and we're taking care of it. Um, but not everybody has that structure or has that ability to do that. And not all of them are going to be school shooters. So I think the
Yeah.
concept as well of what are the triggers? There are loads of warning signs. Why didn't you stop it? I think unless they actually say, I'm coming to the school tomorrow with a gun, I think all of the warning signs are kind of out of because it's just sheer numbers of warning signs.
Well, and the fact of the matter is too is that who are you going to stop? It's all reactionary. You have to wait until something actually happens. You know,
It,
that's just the fact of it.
and I'm not sure that intervening works.
No, sometimes I think it makes it worse.
A great number of school shooters, one of the things that's consistent with the school shooters is that a lot of them are in school counseling.
Yeah.
I just don't know what the answer is. And I'm not doubting school counseling. I think it's an effort that needs to be done, but I just don't know if our current goals are high enough to stop the
Mhm.
school shooter rather than stop the active shooter.
Yeah.
So, I'm all in favor of protecting our people and walking through a metal detector. I have no problem with that going to court. I got no problem with that getting on an airplane. I got no problem
Yes.
with that even going to some sporting
Well,
events. But if
y-
if I have to go through one to go to school with my child, it doesn't give me a warm, cozy feeling of education.
yes. Well, in my time in New York City, we always had, even in junior high school and high school. In junior high school, we had a school cop. And I'm going back to, the 1970s
Yeah,
at this time.
yeah.
And it was because it was New York City. It had nothing to do with school shootings. That wasn't a thing at the time. It was just New York City. So there was a real police officer, not a school security guard, from the precinct police officer in
Mm,
every school.
mm.
And then when I got to high school, we had the metal detectors. And I'm talking again at this time, 1979, 1980. You had to walk. I often make the joke because I went to Julia Richmond High School, one of the poorest performing high schools in New York City. And when you would go through the metal detector and they check you for guns and knives,
Yeah.
if you didn't have one, they'd give you one
Wow.
because that's how tough a
Yeah.
school it was.
Yeah.
So, all right. But no, I don't think there is an answer, Nick. I think it's just something that we're going to have to watch and monitor and hope and pray for. But I don't think there's an answer. I don't think there's one at
I
all.
will say that to stop the bloodshed, there's some great work out there being done by a lot of great people, and the FBI is one of them. They've done some great work in this space. For me, in my research, and I've spoken to about a dozen school shooters, and I've researched dozens of them, and going beyond youth crime as a whole, it's the local police that crack the case. They're the
Always the case.
it's the boots on the ground. It's the guy on the beat, if we can still use that
Mhm.
expression. Do you know what I mean?
Yes.
I go back
Yes.
to the days of Hill Street Blues. Let's be careful out there, because
Yes.
they actually were in harm's way to see it happening, to stop it before it escalated.
Absolutely.
And I think one of the definitive things that are different between 79 and now is the obvious nature of what the police do. I think it's confusing for children. I think they spend an awful lot of time putting up posters rather than community outreach. They'll show up and and I'm not dissing the police at all. I'm very pro police officers. I just think that when the police do their job right, they're the best at it. The training is the best at it. From San Diego to New York, I think American police officers are some of the hardest working people. I have absolute respect for them, and I think given some more resources and time, I don't think we'd have a huge school shooting epidemic as we would if the budgets were staying the same in the police forces throughout our schools and around some of our smaller communities. I don't think we'd have the epidemic we have. I think there's a connection there between just knowing right from wrong, and from not having the visibility of law enforcement.
Yes.
That may not work for me. I mean, I'm not a school shooter. It may not work for the average, a drug dealer or petty theft may not be scared of the police. But for people who are generally a good kid, then flip into a school shooter, this presence of authority is a positive thing, not a negative thing. It could have different reaction to other people, different types of personalities, but that's just my opinion.
Well, I agree with you, my friend, 100%. And we've talked about so much today, but again, I don't think there is an answer to any of it, I'm sorry to say, other than, obviously stricter law enforcement would always help, and more of a deterrent, I guess I should say.
Yeah, I mean,
But
I'm
other
just
than
thinking
that, man,
within the schools, a presence in the schools. That's all I mean. I'm not saying
yes,
strict,
yes.
again, I'm not making
No,
some
no,
sweeping political statement saying that we should be a military state. No, but
no,
being friendly with your school police officer and having them be a good person, I think
yes,
goes a long way to show that police officers are human. I think it
yes,
goes a long way in society.
yes.
Yeah,
And I
sorry.
agree with you 100%.
Yeah.
And that's it. Really, I've really enjoyed our conversation. It's been a dynamite one, and I hope, I can't wait till you write something else, or we just get together for some other reason, because I've really enjoyed talking to you, Nick.
Let's do that. I got loads of stuff going on. In fact, let me just plug myself a little bit. I've
Please
got
do, please.
yeah, I was nominated for a Clue Award for Best Indie Podcast last year at CrimeCon
I know.
for Inesto. I managed to bring home a couple of highly commended awards here in the UK, the True Crime Awards. It's called Inesto: What Really Happened to Adriana Hutto. It's the story of a poor mother who lost a child in her swimming pool and then was convicted and is serving life in prison without parole. It tells the whole story from start to end, how it went from just being a nice little family in their trailer to now being blown apart by a system that I'm not sure really benefited anybody. It's called Inesto, E-S-T-O. I love it if you watch or listen to it. New podcast just came out here at Christmas called NOLA 93. It's about an unsolved murder in New Orleans in 93. Look, there are hundreds of murders in New Orleans, and there are hundreds of unsolved. This is just
Yes.
one, told from the perspective of a wrongful arrested person. It's just a story of one of the hundreds in
Yes.
New Orleans. NOLA 93, and I have a new book coming out next year as well about a horrific crime on the East Coast. And Travis, I will come back and talk about that case. It is
Oh, I hope you do.
for sure. We can talk about that. Yeah. I
And
can't
and
announce
again,
it yet,
I
but
was so happy.
yeah.
I was so happy, everybody, with the details that you have here. And I don't like Mondays. I am very much looking forward to the next book. And what's the name of that book? Is it titled yet?
It's not titled yet. I've just finished the negotiation, and it should be out November time next year, and I'll come back and tell you more about it. But Leigh Hunt, look, I'm a writer. Buy my book. Email me. Let me know what you think. I'm an open door. I'm not big on social media. I don't
Yes.
need to deal with all that stuff. I do it for the education, the advocacy, and getting the stories out there. So yeah, message me. I'll email you back.
Okay. Well, so nice talking to you. So nice talking to you today, Nick. And again, everybody, please, if you have any interest in the story, this is it. This is the book. I Don't Like Mondays. Check it out. I promise you, you'll be happy you did. All the best, my friend. All right. There you have it, everybody. Nicholas Hunt. I Don't Like Mondays. This really was a good read. And I highly recommend, if you have any interest in this story, if you remember this story from years ago, pick it up. It is quite enlightening and just full of every little detail you could come up with. And that's all I got for you this week. Until next time, my friends, please do the right thing. Hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, and we'll do it all again next week. All the best, my friends.
Hey, how you doing? Another nobody here, Travis Myers. This one's going out in particular to all my drinking friends out there, because I got a new favorite thing, and it's called Shanky's Whip, and it is magical. It's Irish whiskey mixed with a little caramel, a little cream, a little vanilla, and it's heavenly. What more can I say? I suggest you pick up a bottle. You can have it as a shot with a cold beer, like I like. On the rocks, it's great. Mix it with a little cola. I promise you, you're gonna love this stuff. Next time you raise a glass, think of me, another nobody, Travis Myers. Hey, do the right thing. Hit that subscribe button so you don't miss any more of my nonsense. All the best, my friends.
Buy our books!
Listen up, this one's important. There's a rule, I never stump for charities, because most of them don't hand out as much money as they collect, and that's a sad fact. But not Tunnel to Towers. These guys do the right thing. They have an A+ rating from Charity Watch, and a 4-star rating from Charity Navigator. That's like the #1 charity watchdog group, with over 93% going towards the families of veterans and first responders who have lost their lives in the line of duty. For only $11 a month, and it's easy. Just go to t2t.org. That's letter T, number 2, letter T.org, and hit the donate button. Do the right thing, and do good for the families and the veterans and the first responders who do good by you. It's only $11 a month. Thanks, and all the best.